My start in activism probably started when I was at Berkeley during the student protests in 2009 there, where we were protesting budget cuts.
I started organizing with the budget cuts movement. At first I was like, kind of like, oh yeah, we gotta roll back the fees, like a little bit liberal. Then we had the occupation of Wheeler Hall in 2009, and it's instantaneously I was like, we gotta have radical action.
That's how I got kind of tuned into, activism, especially radical action, and how the taking of spaces could influence political outcomes.
I think so many people at Cal during that time had that radicalizing moment where we actually took over a building, and then the insane police repression that followed, just radicalized a whole crew of people, and we've been doing it ever since. People call you wacko if you're like, I want to be in this post-revolutionary society. I think that's what I'm fighting for, an anti-capitalist, environment, communize everything and anarchy. And before, people have been like, that could never work. And now I was like, look, people were housed, clothed, fed, everything that you could think of, free medical care, free legal aid, free child care, free, not everything non-hierarchical, no boss, no management, no leader. All of that happened in our camp, and we were actually able to be a commune can exist, and it is possible, and that is something that you should be fighting for. To realize that was a super rewarding point of organizing, because before, when you're a radical, you're organizing for an abstract revolution, and now it's becoming concrete and it's right here,
Occupy the Farm started in late 2011. And before, it wasn't really even the idea of Occupy the Farm. It was just kind of how are we going to take this piece of land? So planning started, doing a lot of research, logistics, and then putting into motion the plan to basically take it, which required a lot of work because we showed up with 15,000 seedlings and huge amounts of equipment and 300 people ready to work. It was really easy for people to plug in because what we were doing, the action was the tactic and it was the demand. It was what do you want? Well, we did what we wanted. We want to farm, so that's all right. We were able to hold the space for 3 weeks, planted out a little over 3 acres in that time. And then eventually, most Occupy spaces got raided. But because of the political situation that we created and the organizing and the outreach that we did, they weren't able to destroy all of our crops because it would have looked really bad on them because we had forced them to basically take this commitment to urban farming. Yesterday, we had another one of our harvest work parties, which we've done 3 of so far. The first one was public, and so the last 2 have been more clandestine.
We're going to go on to Marin, take a right onto Jackson Street, and then there's a gate there that we'll go through. As far as the police presence, we expect a small police presence between 1 and 5 with a recorder, maybe saying you need to leave, or this is a dispersal order, you're illegally trespassing on this land, blah, blah, blah. And generally our practice has been to continue farming when that happens. Pay no attention to it, pay no heed to it. We spend a few hours there, we leave. They know this routine already.
And usually just go in, take care of the crops. So we weed, water, thin out things, and do a lot of harvesting. I think we've harvested roughly 1,600 pounds of food so far. A lot of us estimate that's probably about 10% of what could have been achieved if we had been there the whole time and been using the land the way that we want to. And so it's amazing. We collectively harvest, then we collectively decide how it's going to be distributed. We took the food yesterday to a food desert in West Oakland. About a third of it stayed in Albany, which is where the farm is located, and we're able to distribute all of it, and it all went really quickly.
Oakland was one of the hardest places hit by the housing crisis. And because of predatory lending and the history of discrimination in the housing market and like the really precarious situations of banks giving out loans that they know people are going to default on, Oakland had a huge amount of foreclosures. And so we wanted to fight that. What we saw was like, now is the time to actually fight and make a dent in these foreclosures. But we couldn't do that by doing casework anymore, which was what all the groups in Oakland were doing, was taking one individual house and mobilizing people to come to that house and defend it. And there was multiple groups only stopping like 20 foreclosures a year. And we need to be able to stop 3,000 a year. Like that's the scale that Oakland is hit by foreclosures. So the East Bay Solidarity Network made this proposal called the Summer Where No One Leaves, where we would form a coalition of these 5 groups, and we would take skilled and like experienced organizers, you put them in a place as strictly outside agitators and organize an area to be self-organized and then leave. So not co-opting what's going on there, not trying to boost your resume, not trying to like do any of that stuff, but taking this idea that we should build neighborhood councils so that they can organize and fight foreclosures based on a block by block organizing model instead of a casework model. We chose to do direct action because we think that when the sheriff is about to come evict you from your house, the best way to have you stop that is to look at the phone list of 100 neighbors you have on your wall, call them all to come to your house right then, and like get 100 people to pack your house until the sheriff doesn't evict you. Not to go to court, not to like wait for a nonprofit to come mobilize their base to come to your house, not to like try and fight the legal system on your own, but like having that direct action where the sheriff is like being like, wow, there's 100 people here, I can't get you out of your home.
The infrastructure of insurgency looks like food on every block, occupying land, retaking land. It means housing, so people don't have to earn rent. So it means retaking houses and foreclosures and turning them into organizing spaces. It means occupying buildings and turning them into clinics. It means basically doing everything that our system should be doing and building it as a political tool, because we've come so far as a society that you only have to do basic shit in order to basically be radical. Like, I can grow food on land that kind of doesn't belong to me, and all of a sudden I'm a complete radical, but really I'm just feeding hungry people, which we should be doing anyways. Sometimes my friends make fun of me because they're like, but the stuff that you would wear to Black Bloc is the same stuff you wear to Garden, because I usually just wear all black.
We're against all electoral politics. We're against like the nonprofit industrial complex. We're against the prison system. We're like against local people campaigning for certain things. We don't want to fight for any propositions. So right at the beginning, our main principle is just like, we don't want to do any of that type of liberal organizing that has been done. And so once you have that as a base, you're able to do things like, hey, we're going to call for a general strike. And like, we're going to call for a port shutdown. And we're going to call for like multiple building takeovers. And like, we're not going to be passive. Yeah, we're going to build shields and we're going to stay in the street and we're going to fight the cops. And like, we're going to not back down. And like, we're going to have women, queers, non-gender defining people at the front of those lines.
The feminist vigilante gangs, which I think is a pretty natural kind of evolution of like, you know, once you have a bunch of radical feminists and queers getting together and organizing and being a block in actions and doing their own actions, and also, you know, participating in all this other kind of radical organizing that's going on, I think, you know, and encountering a lot of really fucked up sexism and misogyny and homophobia, you know, once that kind of like simmered for long enough, like it just fomented this idea of like we need to have like a march that is explicitly about feminist vigilantism and like building affinity amongst like people that you trust, and like using that affinity to like protect each other in on the street, in bars, in like organizing spaces too. Even when you like ignore patriarchy and like allow homophobia to flourish, if you ignore racism and allow like from some kind of like imperialist shit to just like be excused, then everything like becomes excused. That's when the cracks open, and that's where the state can like totally take advantage of that shit to like tear us apart. In like places like India, this group of armed women with bright pink saris, and they started as just like kind of a women's self-help solidarity organization, and then at some point we're like, hey, we actually have this power to like wield sticks and train ourselves and beat the shit out of men that are beating the shit out of our fucking feminist comrades. So like, mess with us. We've got thousands of women with giant sticks and we know how to use them. I mean, that's where I see like future revolutionary potential. Personally, there's something that's really terrifying about a bunch of armed women in the street who are going to beat up rapists.
Now, when action happens in Oakland, like a network of radicals is already in place. And even if you destroy our camp, like we are going to be able to mobilize for almost anything that happens now instantaneously. And that hadn't necessarily happened with like a budget cuts movement or with the Oscar Grant movement or things like that. Now there's like this amazing network that's in place.
One of the things I think is really important to me about anarchism and anarchist feminism is the idea that there can be like a global struggle and a local struggle that are tied into each other. So I think it's really important for like what I'm doing in Oakland to like have, a very like local, like a creative collaboration between like global and local perspectives, but to not let either one really take over. And I think that there's a danger in that. That's what I saw with Occupy, is that there's this kind of global sentiment that in many ways like could have like totally blotted out like these really specific things about Oakland that needed to be addressed, like police violence, the schools closing down, the libraries closing down, massive gentrification, like massive foreclosures in Oakland. Like that's the kind of stuff that I think we have the most potential in if we're working on. And I mean, that's how you grow the revolution.
I think the idea of networks is like a really amazing idea that came out of Occupy nationally. We want to fight these local fights and win concrete changes for people, but like creating this bigger way to actually fight the system instead of just individual wins and individual casework, but like actually banging on the system, like actually doing that is going to take a national movement.
It's so, once you get your head out of all of like this muck and you really think about it, you're like, damn, what if 7 billion people all worked together and realized we were on the same squad? Like, that'd be so cool, because imagine all of the shit that we can do. Like, think about all the things that we do, like fighting with each other, like I can transmit data halfway around the world through the air. Like, that shit is crazy. And we did that under the context of like large scale warfare. Imagine if it was large scale peace and we're like, all right, let's just, fix everyone's problems of social inequity and have, you have enough to eat, you're not sick, you have a roof over your head, you have access to clean water, you have access to education, and let's like figure out how we're gonna travel intergalactically. Like, it'd be so cool. Like, I really just want to like shake a lot of people and be like, you don't understand like how awesome this will be once we like accomplish like getting rid of this old order. Like, once we get rid of that, it'll be all, it'll be all good. We can just like kick it in the park or something. Ideally.